Good morning. I'm Pastor Kim Risedorph, and we are here to inhale and exhale and turn our attention to God. In worship, we remember that God created us to live lives of meaning and purpose and joy. A special welcome back to our youth. They were away last week on their youth mission trip, and you can hear all the details the last Sunday in August, August 28th, when they'll be leading worship, and we'll hear more about that trip. And a welcome to all our visitors. It takes a little bit of extra courage and intention to visit a new faith community, so I pray that you feel welcomed and encouraged by what we explore together here today. Today, we remember that, and visitors, there's a gift for you at the visitors table. You'll see that in the courtyard after worship. One of my favorite parts of Sunday mornings is the fellowship time in the fellowship hall after worship. Chance for more informal conversations, light refreshments, and the opportunity to follow up on many of the announcements that you saw on the slides or read in your bulletin. Today we remember that the Olympics started and are going on, and today's a big swim day, in case you're tracking that. And so it seemed natural, a no-brainer to focus on leaps of faith in worship today. It's not quite an Olympic event, but 2020 maybe. The thing about leaps of faith and Olympic level competition, leaps of faith are not something done in reckless desperation. Leaps of faith take preparation and practice because you want to land it. If you're going to take a leap of faith, land it, or it's going to be messy. And so today we're exploring what it takes to make those leaps of faith. And now we begin worship sort of like beginning the Olympics. We bring in the light. It's not the torch, but it is the light of Christ. And it reminds us that we are beginning to prepare our hearts and our minds for this unique hour of worship. As that light comes in, I invite you to inhale and to exhale and to be aware of all the times you've caught a glimpse of God this week. Maybe you saw something beautiful. Maybe you saw generosity or kindness or experienced grace. As that light comes in, let us pause and be aware of all the times God caught our attention this week. May that fill our hearts with song and our lives with peace. Let us worship together. We're in the middle of a sermon series. Last week we looked at living lives of faith. This week we're talking about leaps of faith. And next week we explore that phrase, loss of faith. So, leaps of faith. I got a new insight in that when my family and I last December vacationed in the Canary Islands. Now, the Canary Islands are part of Spain, but they're nestled right into the northwestern coast of Africa. Really mountainous terrain, a string of islands made by volcanoes. So a lot of the land there is inaccessible. Deep ravines, high mountains, and a very creative approach developed in that culture about how to get to places when it looks like you're stuck. And it's called using a shepherd's crook. And it goes something like this. We'll see a man preparing to do that. He has this long pole that's able to bend and not break in times of pressure. And then he aims to the spot where he wants to go, and he leaps down, and he keeps doing that all the way down the mountain. And then after he picks up his groceries, he does it on the way back up, too. So that's what a leap of faith looks like, and there's a Bible story for that. We are reading from the book of Genesis, from chapter 13, and we're picking up the story. Last week, Abram and Sarai had been called by God at a time that was well past their retirement age to start a new journey of faith. And so off they went with their nephew Lot, And in between what we read last week and what we'll read this week, they took a disastrous side trip into Egypt, and we'll catch up with that a little bit more in a minute. But now they are back in what's called the Fertile Crescent, that little arc of land that connects the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean Sea. And it's supposed to be a land rich and able to support all livestock. But it turns out the Fertile Crescent wasn't quite fertile enough. And that's where we pick up the story today from Genesis chapter 13.
So Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the Negev. Now Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. Now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them living together. For their possessions were so great that they could not live together, and there was strife between the herders of Abram's livestock and the herders of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites lived in the land. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herders and my herders, for we are kindred. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, I will go to the right. Or if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left." So Lot chose for himself all the plains of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. Thus they separated from each other. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron. And there he built an altar to the Lord.
So conflict and strife were beginning to percolate. Now, your livestock might be fine. They might have plenty to eat and drink, so you're not experiencing any conflict or tension in that area of your life. But I'm going to guess that you know of conflict or tension in other areas of your life, maybe even this week. Reading the news, watching things in our nation, at home, at work, at school. We encounter moments of tension, moments of conflict or potential conflict. And that's what I love about reading the Bible, when the ancient words become living words about how we might live with faith and even take a leap of faith in times of conflict or of tension. Abram shows us a way forward. First of all, he initiates the conversation. He names the conflict or the tension. That's a leap of faith in itself and takes some courage and might be a role model for us. And I just want to give a shout out to Abram because this was not his normal modus operandi. Little backstory on Abram. I mentioned they had taken that side trip into Egypt. And while he was there, Abram was filled with fear that there was going to be conflict or tension. He knew he was traveling with his quite attractive wife, Sarai. And in his mind, because she was so physically attractive, that the Egyptians might want to kill him so they could marry her. And facing, at that point, that conflict, he decided to lie. He told everyone that Sarai was his sister and asked her to go along with that ruse. And it got worse, kind of threw her under the bus. She ended up in the Pharaoh's harem. And that's when the lie was discovered. Lies are always discovered, and it wasn't pretty. So now they get out of Egypt and they're back on the trail, and at this moment when conflict and tension, Abram handles it differently. He initiates the conversation. He names the conflict. And what we can take home from him is how he approached this. The first words out of his mouth, "Let there be no strife, for we are kindred." Let's not get in a fight about this, for we are all one. We are brothers and sisters. What a great phrase. If you take nothing else home today, let's try memorizing that verse and taking it home with us and living into it the whole week long. Whether you're in conversation, in a meeting, reading the newspaper, listening to the news, what if we internally approached every conversation with the intention that Abram had? Let there be no strife, for we are all brothers and sisters in God's eyes. But it takes more than words to live into that intention. It takes more than good intentions to let there be no strife. And it's what Abram does next that I love most about this story. He says to Lot, you might go this way. Well, if you choose that way, I'll go this way. But if you choose this land, I'll take this land. What stands out to me about that is the graciousness and generosity. Abram was the elder. He had the right. He was entitled to take the land he wanted. It takes more than words to live into a world where strife and argument and quarrels don't define us. It takes this level of generosity and graciousness. Abram didn't pull rank. He didn't insist on being entitled. He didn't feel superior. He knew the only way forward when it seemed like it was impassable terrain was to take a leap of faith and to say the words, let there be no strife. And then to help make that happen, to be gracious and generous in such a grace-filled way. I can say this, and you probably have had this experience as well and can remember an instance of this. When we decide to be gracious and generous, it fills us with joy. There is no greater joy than giving, and giving generously and graciously. May we all know that joy, because that means we're living into this Bible story. Let there be no strife. Let's not fight about this, for we are all one in God's eyes. What a way to transform the world if we start doing it this week. Last week I mentioned, I'm just going to briefly recap, that a group of clergy got together last week, different clergy that live in Livermore, different faith traditions, and we agreed that there was too much strife in our nation. And we wondered what it would be like as leaders of faith communities to live in a world where we all say, let there be no strife, no violence, no racism, no hatred between religions. And we're still wondering what that will look like. But as we live into that, we decided in our various settings for worship, every Sunday, we are going to light a peace candle as part of our worship service. We're going to light a candle so that we remember to be the light. That wherever light is, the darkness has to disappear. In the Christian tradition, we say that Jesus is the light of the world. And when we look towards Jesus, when we walk towards Jesus, when we live towards Jesus, we transform the world with light. May it be so for us.